You're listening to the Perth Property Show, Australia's only weekly property podcast by West Australian experts for West Australian listeners. Catch your latest episode every Monday at 7 a.m.
Hello and welcome to another week of the Perth Property Show. As always, I'm your host, Trent Fleskens. Each and every week, we are talking with Perth's #1 experts in their field relating to property, and this week is no different. In this episode, we're going to talk about interest only versus principal and interest rates, and we've got Arin Di Camilo from Surrey Road Finance in to help us out with that conversation. Arin, thanks for coming in.
Pleasure, mate. How you going?
Good, thanks, mate. This is something that's really a changing environment for us, isn't it? In the last few years, the whole ideology has changed. It used to be very straightforward, in my opinion, and especially if you're investing.
Yep.
Now, there are a lot of considerations as to whether one situation is beneficial or not.
It's not as straightforward at all as it used to be, particularly with the decoupling of rates.
Let's go back.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about when it happened, why it happened, and how it's now affecting our decisions.
Well, it's been happening over a period of time, but probably the most profound impact was in March last year when we talk about the APRA changes, when the banks were forced to reduce their interest-only loan books. And that had a big impact. One of the levers that the banks pulled to reduce the amount of lending they were doing in interest-only was make the lending criteria harder, but also to make the rates slightly higher.
Because before that, it was just
the same.
It was just one rate.
Yeah, that's right.
Whether you're doing interest-only or P&I, it was all one rate, and all you did was just tick a box to say, I don't want to pay principal.
Principal, that's right. Very
Doesn't
easy,
change
very
your
simple.
interest rate. But now, the banks have been very smart, haven't they? And they've used market forces to push us, not force us, but push us away from interest only. How have they done that?
Well, the conspiracists will say it was as a cash grab because it's an opportune time for them to bump rates. But either way, they've changed their rates. So if you've got a principal and interest loan, you might get X. If you're looking to make that, and if it's an owner-occupied property, if you're looking to change that interest only, you'll get a rate bump up a little bit, slightly higher than that. If you're an investment property owner, your rate might be on principal interest, say X plus 20%.
Yep.
And then if you go, not 20%, but 20 points.
Yep.
And then if you go investment interest only, you
get smashed.
You're going to get the highest rate. Yeah, that's right.
It could be at least a 1% differential in some banks' cases.
At least 1%. Yeah, that's right.
Because of that, what is that now making us consider doing?
Well, I guess this is where the results speak for themselves, where it is pushing more people to take a principal and interest approach to their investment properties and paying that down because they're going to get a much better rate. It can make sense for them to do that.
So let's use an example. Let's say you're spending $2,000 a month on interest because your interest rate is 1% higher than the principal and interest one would have been.
Yep.
A lot of people these days come to us, I'm sure they come to you as well, and they say, look, I'm paying too much. And you go, yes, you are. And they say, well, how can we get our repayments down? Well, what we're saying right now is, look, we're not going to get your repayments down too much, but what we're going to do for that same money is put in a whole bunch of principal payments because the interest portion of that is actually a lot smaller now. Yeah,
that's right. So you're paying a much less interest component, therefore you're eating into your capital a lot quicker, or your principal, I should say, and therefore putting you in a better position quicker on that property. So I guess the only caveat we put around that is when we structure a loan, and this is where we'd have to urge people to consult the advice of a tax accountant. Is where you've got some owner-occupied debt and some investment debt. All things being equal, typically you'd like to keep your investment debt at a reasonably high level as long as you're paying down that owner-occupied debt, because that's your non-deductible debt. You want to smash that as quick as you can.
Yeah.
If you've got no owner-occupied debt, then I can't see any reason why you wouldn't have a principal and interest repayment on your investment loan. You want to be getting some equity in there.
I guess it's become a cultural thing over decades. People on their investment loans go, why would I want to pay P&I? Everyone says go interest only. And I guess what I'm saying to people these days personally is think of it as a forced savings plan.
Yes.
You know, it's your money. When you sell that property, you're going to get that money back.
Yep.
So why pay an extra $400 a month in interest just to not pay principal when for that same overall cost, you could be paying that $400 bringing down your loan?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as an overarching principle, that's bang on the money. I think there are circumstances where you would deviate from that. For example, if you're buying an owner-occupied property with a view to turning it to an investment property, say in a couple of years' time, it wouldn't be uncommon for us to set up an interest-only loan with full offset, so we can pay as much as we can into that offset account while we're living in it.
But have the optionality to bring it out.
That's right, but then we use that for deposit on our next owner-occupied, and we still keep the full tax-deductible debt on the existing property. So it's horses for courses. You really want to look at each individual circumstance to work out what's going to work best for you.
Let's talk also about that changing environment for interest-only loans themselves, right? I've got clients and even myself where you'd never be planning to pay that loan off, right? You know, I've got clients who have been interest-only on the same house for 30 years.
Yep.
And I guess a big directive from APRA has been, we want people paying down their debt. They can't have debt forever. So what have they done in terms of those interest-only loans?
The maximum period you can get on interest only is 5 years, which then eliminates the situation where people are sitting on a 30-year interest-only term, having not paid anything off their home loan and potentially not making any capital gain in their property as well.
Flogging a dead horse.
Yeah.
But at the same time also, you could be setting yourself up for pain where on a cash flow basis, you've set yourself up to pay X amount of money, but 5 years from now, there's no turning back unless you sell, which in some cases you can't sell because you're in negative equity.
In a tough spot.
You have no chance. You can't refinance to a different bank. They don't allow you to go on another 5-year loan unless you have really strong circumstances. And the bank you're with have certainly just said, no, we're not giving you another 5-year loan.
Yep.
You're stuck. So you really should be getting into that concept, understanding that you can do it with P&I in the first place.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it comes back to also having a plan about what you want to do with the property. So whether you're buying an investment property or an owner-occupier, have a plan and map it out for 5 or 10 years and have a rough idea of what you want to do. That way, you're not going to end up in a position in 10 years' time where you don't know what you're doing or you're stuck because of not paying off any principal or market conditions don't allow you to.
We've spoken about serviceability before and how different points affect our serviceability.
Yep.
Another point is that if we go on an interest-only loan, that affects our serviceability, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, it changes things, yeah. And particularly, it becomes really relevant when you're coming off that interest-only period. We talked about it before. But for people who've got interest-only loans that are now 3 years old, under the new lending environment, they potentially don't qualify to have their own loan approved again.
And I think a big reason for that is let's use an example. You think you got a 30-year loan. You say, well, I want 3 years interest only because I think I can. Yeah. What that means now is the bank is now assessing you on 27 years.
That's right.
Which means your interest payments will go up because if your loan term's only 27 years, your interest payments per month must go up to pay that all off. So what it does is, whilst you may feel like you're getting a bit of a holiday for the first 3 years, you may actually get a decline from the bank because they say, well, yeah, cool, interest only, you haven't had one before, that's fine, but now that you only want a 27-year repayment terms, you now can't service the debt.
And you're in a false sense of cash flow security for those 3 years.
Either way, you're not going to get the loan, are you?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes, whilst it wasn't really a factor before because the expense assessment wasn't really that critical a couple of years ago, now that it is, all the things add up. It's not just your expenses, your credit cards and whatnot. Interest only is a factor, isn't it?
It is, yep. Definitely makes a big difference.
Arin, as always, thanks for coming in. I hope to have you in soon.
Thanks, Trent. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
We're now going to move across to the suburb spotlight for the week, and this week it's Beechboro, being a City of Swan suburb just outside of Morley Bayswater area in the northeast of Perth. Who better to help us through that analysis than Mr. Beechboro himself, Michael Sammut from Sammut, Rosh and Associates. Mike, thanks for coming in, and let's talk Beechboro.
No problem. So, first of all, with Beechboro, if we have a look at the demographics and the type of people that live in the area.
Yeah, who's living in Beechboro? Why are people moving to Beechboro?
Okay, so it's a very family-orientated area. You have a lot of people who have originally built in the 70s and 80s when the area first came out, and they've been there for a long time. You'll find generally 65 to 70% of the market stays in the area. So I know I grew up in Beechboro. I went to East Beechboro Primary School.
Yep.
And to me, I love the area, and growing up in the area, it's fantastic. So other things with that, you've got generally low to medium income earners.
Yep.
With the median price being at the moment around $375,000 in
Very
the area.
accessible, isn't it?
It is.
When you think about other suburbs around it and the newer estates and whatnot, I guess it's an option for people if they don't need the new sparkly kitchen. Beechboro is pretty affordable and a good level of amenity.
That's right.
You've got Altone Park, don't you? You've got Altone Park Shopping Centre, Altone Park Recreation Centre. You've got Carama shops.
Yeah, from there, a whole range of high schools and primary schools as well, right through the area. You've obviously got Kiara College. They specialise in farming.
Yep.
And the bus routes through there are easily accessible to other areas such as Morley, Midland.
It's the gateway to Swan Valley, really, isn't it?
It is. It's right next to the Swan Valley.
Yeah.
And within a 10-minute drive, you can be in a winery tasting wines.
Fantastic. And a really good point here, I think, on that gentrification level, that comes from having better accessibility to the city and other jobs and whatnot. And what better way to have that than the new Gateway WA extension with Tonkin Highway and Reed Highway right on the corner there of Beechboro?
That's right. It's fantastic what they're doing there. It's definitely cut driving time out by a good 5 minutes getting to the city.
Getting to the airport as well.
Yeah, airport. No more traffic lights going through. Everything just flows.
Yeah. So let's get into the numbers a bit more. What sort of properties are we looking at here? They're obviously the 70s, 80s sort of origin, but we're not talking that straight up 728 square metre 3x1s that you'd find in, your Westminster, Balga, Coolbellups and whatnot. They're a little newer than that, aren't they?
That's right.
Yep.
A lot of the suburbs in Beechboro, the first stage opened up in around 1985. And that went through to around the early 90s. The further east that you go, that's the older pocket of Beechboro.
Yeah, okay.
And then the areas bordering with Morley, they sort of came out in the early 90s.
Okay.
So you've got a whole range of properties that not only look modern, the internals are still quite good. They don't need renovation straight away.
But if you wanted to, they've got the bones for it.
That's right.
It's in that era where it's double brick, really could you still with a good render, a new kitchen, and voila, you've got yourself a fairly new internal house.
That's right. And a good thing with it as well is back then they were using Jarrah in the roofs, so the roofs are really strong. It's not going to be the pine and things like that. Tile roofs, and the only thing that you'll find is generally back then they only ever built 3x1s or 4x2s.
Yeah, okay.
So if you're looking for a property that's a 3x2, generally you're not going to find too much unless it's something that's been subdivided and
developed.
Developed, exactly.
It's a good point, isn't it, where you've got these sort of 700 to 850, 900 square metre blocks in Beechboro.
Yep.
You've got 3x1s, 4x2s. A lot of them, or most of them really now, having that development potential, where it was an R20/R30, R35s now, and that opens up, with some rules, opportunities to develop. Let's talk about that.
That's right. With the recent rezoning that's come through, it came through in November 2015.
Very new. People really haven't caught on yet, have they?
That's right. What happened is they brought in a range of zones through the area. So originally it was R20, which means you needed a fairly big block to be able to subdivide over the 900 square metres.
Yeah, and that really doesn't exist, does it? There's only a couple around.
Yeah, you could count them on your hand.
Yep.
Whereas now, just about every property in the area does have some sort of potential.
Because it's got that split zoning.
Exactly.
What do you have to do to get to that split zoning, though?
Okay. Where we've got it at the moment, there's a few different zones that are throughout the area. Each property is going to be different. So you've got a range between R35, R40 and R50. The higher zonings, like the R50s, they're the ones that are within 500 metres of your shopping centres. You've got some R40s, which are corner blocks throughout the area, and the rest of it is going to be R35. So what that means is most of the blocks throughout the area have some sort of development potential. It's important to look at the property in regards to where it's positioned on the block and whether it can be retained and subdivided in that style. The City of Swan have brought out a rule in regards to it that says that you're restricted to only doing 2 properties on the one block.
Unless you've got
a corner block.
Or maybe 1,300 square metres.
That's right.
Which is just not. Unless you amalgamate 2 blocks, you're not going to find it in Beechboro, are you?
Yeah, that's right. So the way to get around it is if you've got a corner block, you can subdivide in stages where you're actually able to do it like that. It's a bit of a loophole in the system.
Yep.
Except most of the suburb is only restricted to 2 properties on one block.
Yeah.
So let's say you've got a 700 square metre block and it's zoned R50.
You can still only do 2.
You can still only do 2, even though the R code says that you can do 3 or 4 on it. Yeah,
but they've got this policy on top of that saying you can only do more than 2 if you've got over 1,300 square metres to play with. Which it's a very rare case that you and your neighbour or you're going to want to buy the house next door as well to get it done. Yep. I think it's appropriate, Michael, where we're talking about a suburb that's, 20 k's out of the city?
No, about 12.
Is it just 12?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Even at that point, though, we're probably not needing higher density than 2 on a lot right now.
That's right. And they're trying to create it that way because they don't want it to go along the lines of some of the areas like Balga and things like that, where it's
just a denser version of what it was.
Exactly. Yeah. And even areas like that, they're looking at bringing that R code back down again to try and reduce the amount of density coming into the area.
Yeah, because it's just all it's done is create an oversupply of a different type of product.
That's right.
Yeah, which a lot of the time, especially in those medium to lower level demographics, the products that are being built, whilst they look shiny for the first 5 years, 15 years later, it's just another version of that, a denser version of that lower socioeconomic level.
Yeah.
Which leads to more crime, defeats the purpose of the whole rezoning in the first place.
That's right. So the way that they've got it in Beechboro is quite good because you're still going to be maintaining good-sized blocks. People are going to have their own backyards.
They can still make some money developing.
Exactly.
Well, let's move on to, I guess, another point that I think is, it's interesting is what type of buyers are you seeing coming into the area? Who's rocking up at your shop window?
All right. So there's a lot of first-home buyers just because it's within that affordable range for people.
Are they local first-home buyers?
They are, because people that have grown up in the area, they like the area, they're going to try and stay in the area. You've got mum and dad that live around the corner.
Yep.
Same as me, I've got family that still live in Beechboro, and generally you'd stay around the area. So you've got the kids who are looking at buying their first home, and because of the development potential that's come through as well, it's also a good investment for them because they're able to possibly subdivide 5 years down the track to try and get ahead in life.
Or they may be that market that wants to buy that. They may look and go, look, I'm not interested in developing, but for the same money, I'm happy to pay for a brand new 3x2 at the back of a house that was developed.
That's right.
And that's that market that's paying for those development blocks.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is that leading to our next point of what's selling? Are you seeing that development blocks are the real crown jewel in Beechboro, or are there other types of properties that are selling pretty well as well?
All of the properties are selling well. I find that the ones that do have development potential do have a lot more demand on them, especially when you have corner blocks, things like that.
They're a bit easier.
It makes it a bit easier to subdivide, except if you've got your side access, your rear block, those ones are prime at the moment.
Yeah, and they'll sell for a premium.
That's right, definitely.
What I'm taking from this in Beechboro is medium to lower socioeconomic area with some good potential in the development side to just have a look and see, can we put in place a pretty easy house behind a house strategy at a very affordable buy-in price as an investment. But on the flip side, a really good opportunity for first home buyers as well to come in and get something that's either going to make them money or that is on an affordable level compared to maybe a Caversham, going to be able to find these new 3x2 products.
Exactly. And it's also good for people looking for their first investment property, because you've got decent rental yields coming in.
Yep, just as a passive investment.
Exactly. Something that you can sit there for 5 years, 10 years just to receive rental, and then later on down the track, whether you sell or subdivide, it's giving investors options, and it's doing it in an affordable way.
Michael, thanks for your time and thanks for sharing your home turf.
No worries.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Perth Property Show. If you've only just joined the conversation, you can catch up by heading over to our website, perthpropertyshow.com.au, subscribing to the podcast, or joining our Facebook page. Don't forget to tune in next Monday at 7 a.m. for more expert insights, local analysis, and suburb spotlights. Happy hunting!